Madam Mayor, we are alive.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lori. So welcome everyone. It is 12 o'clock on Tuesday, May 17th. And so I will call our special meeting to order. And Mallory, just for the sake of audio visual, if we can do a roll call, please.
Sure. Councillor Clark?
I'm present.
Councillor Donaldson? Councillor Donaldson, are you there? She was here.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Deputy
Sorry
Mayor
about that.
Kennedy? Deputy Mayor Kennedy?
Present.
Perfect. Councillor McKechnie?
Present.
Councillor Smith?
Present.
Councillor Wood Roberts?
Present.
And Mayor Roberts?
Present.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's an awkward time to have a meeting right at 12. So I like some of you, maybe we were just inhaling the last little bites of our lunch. So with that, we'll get started. I do need a mover and a seconder to adopt our agenda today. Councillor Smith and Councillor Wood Roberts. Be it resolved that the agenda for the special meeting of the Council of the Municipality of Dysart et al. Held on May 17, 2022 be approved as presented. All in favor? Okay, that carries. And I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we will invite John Matheson and Stacey Hushen to join us from Strategy Corps. As they're coming on, I did appreciate receiving the information. It gave me time this morning to go through it. It's a lot to digest, and some of the semantics in the words, you have to read over several times. So I actually printed a copy to follow through today. So I don't know if some of you did as well. I see Stacey on, and I will do what I have done for the other meetings with Strategy Corps for our strategic plan is basically turn the chair over, turn it over to Stacey and John. Welcome and thank you very much. So I'm going to turn it over to you to take us away.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. It's nice to see Council, and we wanted to start off by just thanking staff for all their hard work, because I think the biggest evolution you'll see in the document is over the course of the last few weeks, as requested, they've built out both the key performance measurements program and the activities that would be in support of the various key goals. And so the two things we wanted to do with you today was report back to you on with the goals that you'd identified as they relate to your various strategic pillars. We wanted to give you a sense of how those would be given effect and reflected by the specific actions of staff, and give you a sense of what the performance measurement structure would look like. We also, building on your conversation with us last time, we've come up with a couple of different models for how the vision and the mission could land. And I think it's really important in that conversation to say I don't know that it's our best use of your time today to do deep wordsmithing. So what I'm hoping is that we're on the right track with it, and that we can get your comments on it. And if we have to take it away again, we can do that. Or if you think that there's something that reflects where you want it to be, then it's fine if it's done too. But the important point is that it reflects the authenticity of where you want it to be. And I think what you may find is that that oftentimes the vision and the mission really are like the icing on the cake. And so it's not surprising, once we've had a conversation about a lot of the detail, that the vision and the mission may come a little bit clearer based on what you see the actual work being for the next few years of council as this would proceed. So it's actually nice timing to do the pillars and actions and then come back at the vision, mission, and values, and then we can have a discussion about next steps. The only other thing I'd caution you is there's a lot of material here. And so what we need to be is just a little bit disciplined, that we spread our time evenly across the material and not let anything distract us too much from the big picture. And I think if we can have your indulgence, if there's something that really needs a deep dive, then we should probably punt it and let there be a deep dive, but not let it keep us from only getting a third of the way through what we have to do, because there's so much here. So we'll just kind of keep an eye on the clock together and make sure that we get through what we need to get through. But I hope you'll understand if we have to hurry things along a little bit, it won't curtail the conversation, but it may just have to defer some of it to a different day, and we may just have to defer making decisions on some specific pieces if that's what comes about. But you know, who knows? As John Madden used to say, that's why they play the game. So why don't we see how it goes, and we'll see how it goes. Stacey, did you want to start off by introducing this section and work through it together?
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you again. I feel like we also just parted. And I want to echo John's thanks to staff as well for their hard work over the last few weeks in terms of building out those actions and performance measures that will really enable implementation of those strategic pillars and goals. So this slide is really kind of a framing piece, as it's titled, in terms of what you're going to see next. So I think the first thing is you'll see the strategic pillars, which you've seen before. You also saw at the last session, and those reflect those, the main priorities that emerged from our consultations in an earlier phase of this project with all of you, through the staff survey, as well as with the senior management team. And what's important is that the pillars are all interconnected. And I think we've had this discussion before where sometimes you wonder, should this goal fall under this pillar? Does it fit better here? And I think at the end of the day, the thing to realize is when you think about a strategic plan, you think about it holistically, and everything is interconnected, and nothing's in isolation. The strategic plan is really meant to be a living document that talks and speaks to itself and to the various pillars within it. And hopefully that's what we've produced based on everything we've heard. And that, it really is that overarching synthesis of the things that are most important to all of you, to your staff, but also to your community, since you as council have your ears closest to the ground in terms of what the community's priorities are today, but what they also are likely to be over the next 5 to 10 year period. What falls beneath those pillars are kind of the goals, and then further beneath that are the actions and performance measures. And that's really where we've spent the bulk of our time over the last couple of weeks, and where staff have had a chance to provide their really meaningful input. And what we wanted to say about this piece of the document is that the kind of key actions and performance measures are both a mix of outcomes-based and broader activity-focused things. And I'd say, at this time, the performance measures are really a starting point for Dysart. It's also in part because we know that one of the key actions within the strategic plan is the development of an enterprise-wide performance measurement framework that is going to enable the organization to be more systematic and sophisticated in terms of how it measures, tracks, and reports back to council, but also to the community in terms of progress on the plan. And so what we've done is we've actually attached performance measures to this strategic pillars and goals, as opposed to the actions themselves, because what happens in terms of the actions and the implementation steps that will follow are really operational. And so, Tamara's team will be working away at that. But what we, and hopefully all of you as council, want to see is that you're making meaningful progress on the key goals of the strategic plan, and the performance measures that we've identified will allow you to start that process. And so what you do see is a mix. In some cases, you see complete this activity by this date, and that really is the gold standard of performance measurement. But in some cases, you may not be there yet, and that's okay. And it is, can be really effective to have a strategic plan that's dynamic and one that reflects where you currently are, as opposed to kind of setting yourself up with a number of targets that you may not be able to realistically meet. You want to be able to measure progress in a way that's authentic to where you are, where you see yourself, not necessarily measure yourself by someone else's standard. So this is the starting point. And other times you'll see that we've suggested more metrics-based measurements, and that is to start the process of systematically tracking and measuring the data, assessing the data, so that in a couple years' time, you'll have created a baseline. So you'll know what your performance is in that area, and then you'll be able to set the target. Because again, you want to measure against yourself, not against anybody else. I think that's something we now learn is, not necessarily as best practice as we may have thought. And you really want to demonstrate progress in terms of, where the organization is today versus where it is in 5 or 10 years. And it may not matter so much what the other, municipalities around you are doing, as long as you can demonstrate to your community meaningful progress on the things that matter to them. And finally, I think this is almost a point of caution, but not everything can be completed at the same time. There's simply not enough resources or money in the world for everyone to do everything at once. I am personally facing this as I recently bought a house and have a number of challenges, and you have to triage. And that's the beauty of a strategic plan. That's what a strategic plan enables you to do. It enables you to triage. Where do we need to devote our resources? Where should we be devoting our resources? What things on the list of needs and wants come first? And how do we decide that? Your strategic plan is the roadmap for those decisions moving forward. So without further ado, we have the proposed strategic plan framework, which you've all seen a version of this before. So we won't spend too much time here, but this is your full kind of strategic plan here. So this is for the first pillar, which is sustainable growth and environmental stewardship. You have your goals, you have your performance measures that are designed to be able to report back on progress against those goals. And when we did these in consultation with staff, we really did think about what would you need to measure to be able to say, yes, we are on the right track with respect to this goal. We're moving in the right direction. And then the third column is the key activities or the actions that staff will undertake and report back on in terms of enabling those goals to become reality. And so for each pillar has these three sections: goals, performance measures, and actions. And we're really here to work on this and receive your input on this today. Anything you'd like to add, John?
No, I think that's great. Maybe I just add a couple of quick points. One is, if 70 key performance indicators is great, 71 isn't, 1/70th better. I mean, I think you really want to be careful about having too many, especially as you're embracing a culture of performance measurement. To the whole point about prioritization, it's not just getting stuff done, it's how you do the stuff that you need to prioritize. And I think the experience of the Ontario Municipal Best Practice Institute, the infamous OMBI, is relevant, because I think there was a great big rush to aggressive performance measurement, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I think the experience of a lot of municipalities was that we were drowning in measurement activity rather than swimming in useful data. So it's just an important point is to make sure that what we're doing is getting the right measurements. And I also think you might well expect that some of this might evolve over time, right? Because you can totally imagine that 2 or 3 years from now, if we just take an example from the second column of the first row, number of planning applications by type, that's a great thing to start measuring. A couple of years from now, you may say, you know what, that's not helping us. It's not telling us what we need to know. And I think that's a journey that you're going to go on collectively with staff as you figure out what they find productive to measure and what you find informative for them to report on. So you're going to want to view this as being like a first shot at taking some things that are already measured and some things that aren't being measured and moving it in the right direction. I think that's the main thing. So, actually, there's one other thing, which is your staff actually wound up adding in all kinds of detail in some instances. And what we did was we sifted it into 2 buckets. The stuff that was strategic enough that it belonged as an explanation to the strategic plan, and then stuff that was so operational that it totally belongs in an operational plan, and it's just further reason to believe that when they say they're going to do this action, that then they've got like 5 or 6 or 8 or 12 different specific operational things that they're going to do to operationalize it. But this is a strategic plan. It's not a staff operational plan for the work department. And so what we've done is we just teased that stuff out. But I did think you'd be interested in knowing that they took it so seriously that they actually flooded us with almost more than you would want to use. And so, this is what we do. We do editorial choices or curatorial choices between what's an action that actually elaborates on a goal versus what's an element of detail. It's strategic to say I'm going to cook dinner, and it's action oriented to say I'm going to make steak and potatoes and asparagus. It's operational to say I'm going to clip the ends off the asparagus. I'm going to put them in tinfoil. I'm going to add butter. I'm going to put in some herbs and a little bit of lemon. And then I'm going to put them on the barbecue, and I'm going to keep them there for 25 minutes and so on. That's not strategic. That's operational. This isn't a recipe book. This is what you're going to serve for dinner. This, and the fact that you're going to serve dinner, and the fact that you want to have a social life. This isn't a recipe book for everything that's here, but your staff are well along the way to developing the recipe book, which is a good thing. But I'm happy to say we've spared this document from it, or you'd be cursing us in a couple of years because you'd be crushed under the weight of the detail. And so much of it will be out of date in 6 weeks because they'll have gotten the tinfoil and they have clipped the little ends off the asparagus, and in 6 months, no one will care. So but I just think, it's useful for you to know how staff is reacting to your general direction, and I would say vigorously. So there you go. That's how asparagus relates to your strategic plan this afternoon.
That's a great point, John. I think just for reference, so even under 1.1 here, define Dysart's growth vision in consultation with the community, there's about 6 steps that staff have already gone ahead and started thinking about. And so if we've done a lot of strategic plans, and this is exactly what you want to see, is staff are already trying to think about what's the next step, even for the rest of this year and into 2023. So they're very kind of committed in terms of actually moving forward with implementation. And that's a great thing to see. It's exactly what you hope for, but not something that needs to be in a presentation like this, just something you need to know about. So any thoughts on what's before you? I know some of you hope for a bit of time. Would have been nice if you had a little bit even more time to sit with the document, but such is the way of the world.
We can sort of, we should maybe just draw the specific linkages between this page and the previous page, just so you can get the flow of it. If we just pop back up to the framework. So the first 4 items under the sustainable growth, you'll see how it's establish a growth vision. And then the second one is mitigate climate change impacts and so on. So then if you pop back down to the page that you were just on, you'll see how it tracks. Each one of the boxes from the main columns is elaborated on here. And it's maybe also just, so if the first one is establish the growth vision, the actions are all around, okay, so we're going to have to define what our growth vision is, and then we're going to develop policies to direct and guide it. And we're going to review our approvals process to identify potential improvements and efficiencies to ensure compliance with the policies. That's really important. And then develop or update policies to ensure that growth pays for growth. That's where your vision around the shape of growth fits with the finances of growth, which are of course inexplicably interwoven. And then the performance measures, you'll see this is what Stacey meant when she was talking about there's a mixture. The first is an outcome-based one, which is, okay, we are going to adopt a growth plan by a date. And we've left it as X as a date because I think that needs to be a collision between how quickly staff think they can do it and how quickly council wants it to be done. And of course, that's about what's operationally feasible. So in a couple of cases, there's been some dates here. I'm sure that the intention is to not have the date be 2037, but I'm not sure that anyone was quite ready to commit to the second quarter of next year yet, given how big a task that is. But operationally, that's the target. And so then other performance measures are the number of planning applications by type and the percentage of planning applications meeting the review timelines specified in the Act. And as you know, those just changed as a result of Bill 109. But so here what you'd be doing is we'd say we're going to have a growth plan that's going to set the strategic direction. We're going to track the volume, or we're going to track the pace of approval. Now, there's other things you could track too, right? You could track the value of building permits, or you could track specific details around types of housing. But actually, if you scroll down to the fourth line, you actually see under ensure the housing mix supports housing demand. This is like a further elaboration on your growth. And that's where we get into the number of housing units by type, and particularly their affordability with new attainable or affordable housing units. So you see how some of these things fit together. The other broad category here is the climate change impacts and respecting the natural environment. And you can see that the climate change impact stuff, some of that stuff is aimed at your own operations. Some of it is aimed at kind of year-over-year tracking of the most serious type of damage that you're experiencing. One is your ability to implement the thing that's your biggest single footprint piece, your green fleet policy. And then the other is representative of an idling policy that you could put in place. So those are the sorts of activities that are, frankly, other municipalities are doing that you'd be able to track. And some of them are kind of like canary in the coal mine stuff. It's not listing everything that you might possibly do, but it's a 40,000 foot level stuff. And so, if you wanted to double down on that, you could also say, we're going to have a climate change mitigation strategy by such and such a date, and adopt the structure of the adopt the growth plan by such and such a date. You could have adopt a climate change mitigation impact by such and such a date. And then within that, there would typically be other performance indicators that, staff would be recommending to you as part of that strategy. And, you can see also there's, waste diversion year over year. Wherever you see YOY, that's year over year. And number of public education initiatives. And so again, these are meant to be a series of snapshots of things, as opposed to like a whole video of everything that's going on all the time, everywhere. But a series of indicators that are nudging you in the right direction.
I think we have a couple of hands up I can see. I think Councillor Clark, you were up first, and then Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Stacey. John, there's a number of drivers that have a lot of impact in terms of what we're trying to identify as actions and result. And what I'm thinking of is such things as migration. With aging of population, we're getting a lot more migration up here, which is almost like a context type of a thing. Similarly, some of the broadband ties right in with our economic opportunity. Companies no longer have to be situated in Ottawa or Toronto, or individuals even. They now have opportunity to work a couple of days a week, or primarily from a more of a remote location. And this is all, to me, I guess, is context as to why certain actions or certain things are going forward. So is there a context document or context statements that will go with each of these sections?
That's a really good question. Really, your SWOT analysis was, I think, you and staff working together to identify the context, and typically that goes into kind of an environmental scan. And you're right; those are important measurables that are driving your context, and over the course of the life of the plan, as they change, so too will the environment in which you're operating. And then the performance measures, these tend to be things more that are more under your either direct control or ability to influence. And so typically when we do the final version of the strategic plan, there's a section that sort of summarizes the SWOT analysis, and that has some of the context pieces. As to how big that section will be, we don't typically make it too large, but it would kind of point generally at the indicators that you're talking about, without necessarily being like an environmental commissioner's report on 37 different aspects of it. So but the drivers that you're talking about would be things that you're going to need to keep track of, but they're probably not performance measures. They're more like environmental scan measures.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And so, having had a chance to look at this document this morning, John and Stacy, first off, thanks to you for driving, what I would categorize as significant improvement since we last went through it. A lot of new development here and so forth, and then echo your comments in terms of thanks to all of the staff members that have worked at this, because it really is, has come together quite nicely, I think. The point on this, I got some others as you get further into these topics, but when you look at the goals here, we've got 4 on this one, and I was wondering about the sequence of them. We've kind of established along the way that protecting and respecting our natural environment is basically essential to our community. Without that pristine natural environment, we'd soon become virtually nothing. And with that being lower down here in terms of this list, I'm worried that might be sending the wrong message. And then particularly with mitigating climate change impacts kind of being positioned above it. Many in our community are very passionate about addressing climate change, but there are others that poo-poo that and suggest it's somebody else's problem to deal with. So I'm sensitive to the sequence of these, and in particular with regard to those comments. I even wonder if protecting and respecting the natural environment, you could make an argument that it should be number 1 in this list, but certainly no worse than second, because creating a plan or vision for the community is kind of an overriding thing and such. But anyway, great progress, and just that comment, we'll talk about that furthermore. Thank you.
So let me give you 2 answers to your comment, because I think it's a really good one. And Stacy, could you just pop up to the previous slide for a second? The truth is, the only reason we number them is to make it easier for you when you're saying on line 3, because when you don't number them, it's brutal. Because there's just a bunch of unnumbered lines, and it's really difficult to refer to things. But we never mean to imply that there's a rank ordering in them. So that's the first answer. The second answer is words matter and position on the page matters. And even if we don't mean that there's a rank ordering, sometimes people imply that there is. So we can totally change it because if there's no point in it being in the wrong order if there's no implied order. So we can fix it however you like. But I think if we stick growth, vision, and plan for Dysart in the bottom, we still wouldn't mean that it was the least important any more than we would mean that protecting and respecting is the third most. Like, I think a lot of these are kind of indivisible. Now it could be that we find one later in 20 or so that you think, well, that's not as important, and so that might be a reason. But like, words matter. So I totally agree with you. But this is where the challenge of being an organization with 100 lines of business and 25 or so legitimate priorities, you got to have some priorities. So I think we should be attentive to what you said.
Hi, Stacy. Yeah, just to follow up on what Councillor Smith said and then John's response. It's funny how, like, I didn't read it that way, that they were priorities. I read it as a wholesome or whatever you want to call holistic approach, that it wouldn't matter. I tend to agree with what John Matheson just said, which is it shouldn't matter the order. I think what's going to end up coming down to it is you have this high level strategic plan, and then a new council comes in and wants to do their individual goals and objectives, and then they have to match it back against the strategic plan. So it doesn't matter what order it is. The words matter of the detail, but not the order. it's just to follow along. It's a whole, everything is equally important here, and everything is interconnected. So I'm not hung up about the numbers or the columns or the fact that, like, even as you go across the columns that way, let alone within the columns of the different goals, like we could get hung up on that, and I don't think we should. I think we should just focus on the whole thing is equally important.
And if I could just make one further comment, I can share an experience I had in a municipality that shall remain nameless about a year ago. They had a list that was rather like this one, and council had created it in their first year, and so they were getting around their third year, and they had a new CAO, and the new CAO said, I just want to know what's most important to you, because I will do whatever you wish, but I don't get the sense that each of these things is equally important. And so that kind of runs contrary to what I was saying. You know, like there's no implied priority by position on the page. But after a couple of years of working on things, what we found when we went through them with council was that there were some things that were as important as ever, and they were burning priorities. And there were some things that, and they were burning priorities in the sense that there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And there were others where they were really important, but lots of work was being done. And so we called those category 2s. And there were others where some stuff had been done, and it was probably enough. Like what was planned and what had been done was acceptable to the end of term. And then there was the fourth category, you know, perhaps they hadn't reflected as carefully as you had, because there were a couple of them where they said, I never even knew what that meant, or we never had a resourced plan for that, or yeah, nobody really agrees with that one anymore. And the infamous category 4s were the ones that kind of went on the manana list. And, you know, to either be figured out what they did mean, or maybe to be dropped in the new and upcoming strategic plan. So I think again, there's the word order on the page, and then there's going to be how you feel about them in a couple of years. And Stacey, if you can just jump to the next page again, I think where you can really have a very meaningful contribution as council working closely with staff on this is you see how it says adopt the growth plan by X, or adopt the green fleet policy by X. One of the ways you really signal how important it is, you know, that could say by 2029, or it could say by January 2023. And so that's another place where you can signal importance. It's just super important, unless you want to have a lot of things showing you up late, that you work closely with Tamara and her team so that you pick dates that are feasible. Because, you know, doing a new growth plan, it probably takes 18 months whether you want it to or not, if you're moving as quickly as possible, just because of the inputs and studies that have to be done. And I'm sure that somebody might say 18 months, are you kidding? It's 36 months. So if you're really thinking everything through. So it's just a matter of being hitting the right political prioritization to signal importance, and the realistic public administration outcomes that you're going to get to, because nobody wants a whole lot of red X's because you're hitting deadlines that were never realistic in the first place. That doesn't make council look good, and it's demoralizing for staff.
Yeah, John. So on that note, when I saw these and I saw the you know, by XX, by the dates, in my mind, I thought that, and incorrectly or whichever, that no date should be there. That because they're like you know, we have a strategic plan that this term of council is adopting, but it's meant for the corporation. And so really that should be a new council's to look at this, and they pick a date, not that's written in the strategic plan, but that's written in the goals and objectives. They might say, like, I mean, I'm just going to say, when I became mayor, it was an objective for me to have a strategic plan. I think we're about 2 years behind, but that's okay. It's happening. But I'm really glad we didn't have a hard and fast date. So I almost have a tendency to not put a date in those things. They're in the plan, which means they are something that we do want to measure, but let a future council decide 2023 or 2025 or whichever it is. That's why I think councils, as they come in and get elected, need to have some flexibility to prioritize and match it against it. That's my thought.
So you guys ask all the good questions because there's two real important points in what you just said. One is respect for the decision-making autonomy of the next council, and which is really important. And the flip side of it is, you know, that SMART goals thing we talked about, the T in SMART goals is time bound. And so if you want to be strictly adherent to the time bound thing, then some things are good to be time bound. But honestly, both principles are right? Like, it's good to be time bound and it's good to be respectful to the priorities of the council that's coming. So that's a totally legitimate decision. The reason why we didn't fill them in with imaginary dates is because we don't write fiction. And we didn't want to do that to you or to tomorrow. The reason why we put them in was to say you might want a date here, but you're absolutely right. It would be equally legitimate to say we're signaling the importance by putting it here. Let's figure out in next year's operating plan that is backed up by a budget decision that's going to hire whatever planning consultants you need to do it, or to do your master plan for this or that, and let them put in the dates. And that's totally legitimate too. But what you'd find across Ontario is some municipalities lean one way and others lean the other. What matters is what's right to you. If you think that it's abundantly clear that you mean it, then you don't need a date. Sometimes when people put in the dates, it's because they're trying to convince themselves that they mean it, and they don't want to, you know. So, and that's good too, you know.
Well, and I
There's
think
no one way to do this.
I was just going to say it's an art, not a science. And it, at the end of the day, that's true for strategic planning and performance measurement. It's about finding what fits for your organization and going with that, because we've seen it both ways. To John's point, some have very rigid SMART goals and others don't, and that's because that's where their organization is at, and that's what's needed at the moment in time. And a strategic plan is, of course, creation of a particular moment in time. So maybe for this one you don't have dates, but maybe in 5-10 years time you'll actually want to put some dates, because you'll have evolved and changed, and you know, more sophisticated in terms of your operating planning and your budget planning, or maybe you still won't want dates. But that's what a strategic plan, when John and I keep talking about authenticity, this is exactly the kind of conversation that we wanted to have. It's exactly the kind of conversation that we like to have, and it's what makes your strategic plan unique to Dysart versus like a cookie cutter that could be, this could be Dysart, this could be Bracebridge, this could be for whoever.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, just so on that note, I'm going to scroll over so I can see the screen. And I know, John, you said at the beginning that we're going to watch your time, but I think this is a real pivotal point here. So if maybe we could just look to see from the rest of council to my comments about not putting in a date and letting that be more of a, let's call it a new council's goals and objectives, or, you know, or are people looking for a hard, fast date? So I'm just going to scroll across to see what, oh, no, that didn't work. Hang on.
We can take it off the screen so you can see.
So maybe just with a show of hands to make it easiest, how many people would prefer no date in there and let that be more of a, like, the future council is going to be bound by this plan. So how about no date? Okay, there you go. That was enough.
Easy.
That was easy. Okay, I'll scroll back. Thanks.
If you want to pop it up against this, there it is. So all those little yellow things will disappear. Now, another thing to watch for is the verbs. You know, adopt means you're going to do it. Review and study or consider means you're going to take a look at it. And if you know you're going to want one, you just don't have it yet, then adopt is the right verb. If you're not sure and you think that that's anticipating an outcome that isn't legitimate, then we should change the verb so that it's, you know, review, study, and that kind of thing. So if there's any adopts or verbs that are scaring you, you should let us know, because we could soften them.
I think Councillor Wood Roberts has her hand.
you're talking about verbiage, so if you did it like a develop, maintain, and re-evaluate a growth plan. So there's no date. It's an ongoing sort of body that gets reviewed or reevaluated.
You know, I'm thinking of the idling policy. You know, like a lot of people think idling policies are a really good idea. I don't know if there's anyone who doesn't think an idling policy is a good idea, but it would be presumptuous of us to use the word adopt if some of you think it should merely be studied. That's really what I'm calling it.
John's point also applies to the actions. You'll see in a number of places, sometimes it's develop, sometimes it's continue if it's something that you're already doing. Often we see promote several times, and I believe there's a couple, if I could just scroll here, there's a couple of undertake a feasibility study, explore the feasibility, and that's with respect to expansion of the sewer system, and then also municipal water, that those are both things that you're going to look at, but not commit to at this time.
And the important signal there is that you're on it, but you've not prejudged the outcome. It's before we just move permanently onto the infrastructure thing, did anybody have any further comments? Oh, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just to the last point that you and Stacey have put forward, and consistent with the, I think the mayor's fair point about leaving these things to the next council. We are not going to get a green fleet policy, an idling policy in place before at the end of our term. Would unless I'm shocked. And therefore, I think that it needs to be positioned as evaluate and, if appropriate, implement a green fleet policy or an idling policy or what have you, and that somehow we need to trigger the opportunity for the next council very early in their term to consider a whole bunch of these things, and they can decide, the members of that new council, which ones they want to pursue first and by when. It's entirely possible that the voters could say if a candidate's going to talk about climate change, they're not going to get elected, and so therefore having these as adopt a policy might be inappropriate.
So, Councillor or Deputy Mayor, rather.
Yeah, speaking on the climate change, those two, adopt green fleet policy and idling, I think we're probably going to be driven by the county climate change program that's happening there. I think you're going to see those two policies will probably be right across the upper and lower tiers whenever they happen. So maybe we need to make some kind of reference to the county climate change vision and things that are happening at that level.
So to be specific, what we could do is we could drop the 2 bullet points that are adopt out of the performance measures as premature. And then really, if you look at number 1 and number 3 under actions, develop and implement policies to support environmental sustainability. Those would be the sorts of policies you'd expect to come out of that general direction would be a green fleet policy and an idling policy. And then what we could do to capture your point, Deputy Mayor, about working with the counties, we can just say in collaboration with the county, develop and implement policies. So we'll leave we'll drop 2 of the performance measures as going too far, but presumably the policies that you wind up adopting wind up coming with new performance measures that are of use to you. Councillor Clark?
John, you've raised an interesting point, and it probably ties back with the service review you're doing. But there's so many things that we could be active with at the local level. But reality is, what we will be doing will be driven, as Deputy Mayor Kennedy has said, by initiatives from the county level, and hopefully some kind of continuity on what we're doing with the other 3 townships. So it's I guess I'm trying to figure out how do we recognize something is important for us, but we recognize that it's some things are better addressed at an upper level, so that we're not just covering the same territory as the other 3 townships.
So there's a couple of ways we can do that. One is you'll note that in the 3rd column, there's already several references to continuing to work with the county. And again, just to give credit where credit's due, we didn't write this, for the most part, right? We may have edited it, but it's your staff who are already demonstrating they're very mindful of the need to collaborate. But down in section 4, around governance and operational excellence, there's also, in the collaborative space, there's several references to working with the county there. There's also, like in the introductory sections to the document as well, it's possible to make ample reference to that too. So I think we can make it clear that Dysart's general direction is to collaborate with the county, but we may be able to, I don't know whether it's under sub 4 of continuous improvement, or whether it's under the modernize municipal processes and services. I think each one of those things is likely to be done in collaboration with the county, but we could have one that specifically says, continue to work collaboratively with the county on shared service improvement processes. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Wood Roberts.
Yeah, I was just going to one thing, just sorry not to jump over you, but just in the implementation pieces, which are not in this document, but were sent to us by staff. I have gone through them exhaustively, and there are a number of references to working with the county and leveraging ongoing county initiatives, as well as strategies that they're doing, whether it's on climate change, shoreline policy, housing. So you can rest assured that your staff have a very clear head in terms of understanding what things are being done at a county level and how we may be able to build on those or continue those efforts. So it's built in. It's not on the page before you necessarily in every single case, but staff are very attuned to that. And I apologize, Deputy Mayor, for jumping in.
No need to apologize, Stacey. I just also want to say we don't want to be held back by the county either. Dysart is very progressive in some areas that may be ahead of some of the others. I just don't want to lose that being the front of the pack kind of a thing. There's been lots of examples where we are plugging ahead of the county, but maybe we have the opportunity at a lower level to take advantage of our size and just drive something forward. I just don't want to lose sight of having to get 4 bodies in agreement when if we're committed to that, whatever it is, that we can go ahead and do it on our own. So just a caution, I guess, that while we want to work with the county, there are going to be times when we're going to be forge our own path. Just to complicate it, John.
No, that's good. And Councillor Wood Roberts, you are next.
The other thing, I mean, we have lots of performance measures and lots of actions, and in the implementation, we really have to keep in mind that the more of that we have, the higher the fiscal implication for our staff. I mean, there's going to be a lot more tasks for them, a lot more work. We may need to increase our staffing complement. Like there's a lot of other implications to making a plan on a piece of paper. That was all.
Very true. The other thing too is it could even be a value that you collaborate. Well, you've got it. Strong communication, engagement, encourage collaboration with the administration, within the administration and the community, but we could add and county partners. So If it's something that's just so part of the atmosphere of how Dysart does its work, it could definitely be there. And then those values inform every single activity and goal within the document. But it could also be in section 4 under continue to modernize municipal processes. And it's interesting that the staff of each have taken several of the things that actually came out of either the Dysart or the county optimization service delivery processes. And there isn't one basket reference to collaborate on all of them as appropriate. So we could create that. And I think, having talked to Tamara about it, I think that would reflect the reality of what's going on without doing a lot of violence to the draft. So there's a couple of options there.
Go back up.
So the value of implement and fund the asset management plan is that it's like the requirement to have an asset management plan is provincial, but the political kind of commitment to fund it is, that's real. It means something. So that's kind of what that is. Invest in infrastructure renewal and expansion. You might go to some places where it just says maintain infrastructure in a state of good repair. In other places, it might not say anything. And then ensure service standard policies align with emerging community needs. It's very common to have a suite of policies that hasn't been updated systematically for a long time. And if you were to see all your policies in one place, you'd be shocked by how much work has been done over the years to create so many policies. And so it's a very common need in municipalities to kind of do a comprehensive policy review every few years just to make sure that they're reflecting where you want to be. So those are the main 3 points there that you all had reflected in the goals, and you can see how there's actions that give specific meaning to them. And I think what's interesting about the performance measurements is you're sort of tracking the value of your assets and the gap between the state of good repair and your reserves. So in effect, you're sort of creating something that in another place you'd almost expect the Auditor General to do. Have a report that tells you how are we doing against the goal that we set ourselves. And what I like about percent major capital projects advanced versus projected, that's not you committing future councils to spend money. That's you saying, well, we want to track the variance between what we did and what we said we were going to do, which means you're tracking yourself against yourself as opposed to against some sort of abstraction. And then, set a schedule for the overall update of the service standards. That's going to be done in consultation with Tamara so that we don't say, oh, we'll have them all done by January. And in a brand new integrated font too. Indent them all to the left, will you? Like we've got to guard against creating the task that simply can't be done without busting morale of your team. Madam Mayor, and then Councillor Clark.
To find my unmute. In number 3, which is ensure service standards policies align with emerging community needs. So would that be an example of, say, an infrastructure, a facility, let's just say some type of recreation center that we don't have right now, but that there's community demand and community support for, I don't mean demand in a negative way, just a desire and support for. So then you have to establish, it's when we add a whole nother new facility. Would that be sort of included in that? Because there is I would say a desire already. We're thinking about, to enhance the recreation opportunities or even not just recreation, but like our own roads garage. Would that be where that would fit in? where we go to create a new facility?
I think it's probably in the line above, line 2, and then action number 1. And this again, Councillor Smith, is going back to the reason why we number them. Not priorities, but just so we can find each other rapidly. That'd be the now. It's interesting because it talks about the renewal of aging rather than the expansion. Your staff were so polite here because they said renewal of aging, including proactive maintenance and potential consolidation. They didn't actually want to commit you to new things, I think. But it could be that it's develop a plan for infrastructure needs, including renewal, expansion, maintenance. So it could be that that idea of expansion needs to be built into that point number 1. Because I think it would be a bit of a shoehorn if it were put into the original point. That was meant to be more operational policies rather than a long-term needs assessment. So that's something that we could add if people think that that's missing. So when it comes time to keep score, Madam Mayor, that might be one we want to put to everyone. Councillor Clark and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, John. You have the, both the infrastructure expansion and the service expansion are pretty key elements to going forward. And I guess I'll come back to the point of the drivers and the context again on this, and especially with this going forward to a new council. We've got 2 very distinct groups that are looking at this or are either going to support it or oppose it. We've got those in the community are happy the way things are. They don't want to see any increase in tax. They don't want to see any change. They want the village to stay at 1,000 people or 1,200 people for the next 40 years. And then we've also got the new reality of what's coming in and the aging infrastructure, as the mayor has alluded to, something like a community center is key. Having water in the community is going to be essential to any kind of growth or expansion in the village. So to provide the next council, the next group, they got to deal with this, some kind of overview on the drivers and why certain things are in here. I think it's very, very important to this being a successful document going forward.
Yeah, it's like the whereas clauses.
Yeah.
It'll give it context after you're not here, if that happens. Yeah. So just, I think one thing that might improve action number 1 would be make it more generic, develop a plan for municipal facilities and assets, including renewal, expansion, maintenance. So just so that it's more generic. But Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And just a minor point here. We mentioned wastewater and sewer expansion, municipal water. I wonder if we should get the word septage in there so that people can see, and frankly, most of our residents, it is the creation of septage and the disposal of septage that's a concern to them. And field spreading is the, the current and less desirable approach. So I'd like to see a reference to septage in there somewhere.
Is there a specific place you think it would be fit best? Just.
Well, I think in the performance measures there, where you've got wastewater and sewer expansion, municipal water, that it would fit in there very well, and it ties into the other municipal facilities that we're evaluating, and whether it's new or what have you.
So it would be completed feasibility studies in bracket, wastewater and sewer expansion, semicolon, septage, semicolon, municipal water?
Yeah, I think that's, just say septage disposal or something like that.
Yeah.
John, just to chime in, I think we should hear from Tamara because she's been, heavily involved with this too. Because we've already undertaken the sort of feasibility. So we've already done that part of it. So maybe it just needs to be a whole nother bullet point. So is it okay to see Tamara's where she thinks that should fit in? It's a good point, Councillor Smith, to bring up, because we have been clearly talking about it and we're well underway. but maybe there's a whole new bullet point it should be.
Yeah, I think maybe in our input notes we provided, we mentioned the septage facility specifically, but I'm not sure if it landed in our end, like in the implementation notes or not, but maybe it needed to come out more in the front. It could just be part of that in terms of undertake a feasibility study with regard to expansion of the township's wastewater and sewer system. So we've done that. So yeah, maybe a separate line to continue with the creation of the septage handling facility.
That's why I'm thinking it should be.
We might have called it geotubes in our notes. If you see something in there, it might come across as that.
That's why I think it should be a separate bullet point, because under number 3 bullet point says undertake a feasibility study. We're past that.
We're past that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is geotubes in the documentation that we were sent. So we can add that in for sure.
Okay.
So to just take stock before we move off, Madam Mayor, if you wanted to just see if everybody's got agreement around those 2 points, adding in the septage and broadening point 2.1 to be broader. We can take the screen down for a sec so you can see everybody.
Sure. That's great. So the first point was adding bullet point to the geotubes, and then including like possible new facilities, not just or however we reworded that. So is there, I think, a fair agreement that we want to include those? I see nods and heads nodding up and down. That's a yes.
Okay. Thank you. So we can jump to the next slide. So here's your economic development and prosperity. And you'll recall your 4 themes here were an open for business approach and promoting and renewing the downtown core, expanding access to broadband, and continue to support the arts and culture sector. And so you can see the various actions. I won't read them at you, but maybe you just take a look and see if you have any concerns. I assume based on your previous, we'll take out the by date for adopt the downtown secondary plan.
John?
Yep.
As we're looking at this, could you define what secondary plan means? So maybe that's come out from lots of comments, but I'm a little confused on what specifically secondary plan means.
Oh, okay. It's times like this when I wish I'd gone to planning school or that I could quote the Planning Act better, but generally the secondary plan is the one that puts, if the broad official plan sets the broad scope of your development goals, and then the secondary plan gets like right down to more of a specific precinct plan that sort of shows you that, like, more rather than just by building blocks, it starts to get very specific.
So we used to have a built form, or do still have built form guidelines, but they're outdated and haven't been reviewed. So is that a type of thing? So the actual like facades and color palette and like down to the nitty gritty, is that the kind of thing you're looking for?
So those are typically in the design guidelines that can be part of a downtown secondary plan. I'm at a disadvantage. I don't know if your planner is around tomorrow as to the detail that they were planning on going to in this.
Jeff in the background to be pulled up there, Mel.
Yeah, Lori can promote Jeff onto the screen.
It's better to hear from him directly as to what he's got in mind, because even within the world of planning, you can have a range of detail. So.
I think it would be helpful as just coming in because, gosh, I might get the dates wrong, but 2012, 2013, we did the streetscape plan and had a design for the downtown core, and right down to what the light standards were in the park benches. So I see Jeff Jeff, if you've been listening, I was asking what a secondary plan actually means.
Well, a secondary plan is similar to our official plan, but it's a secondary plan. So it's actually something that's being considered. If council might recall, during the service delivery review process, it was recommended that official plans be consolidated at the upper tier. And in that instance, it might be appropriate for our municipality to consider a secondary plan for our villages and our hamlets. So that's kind of just an example of what that secondary plan might look like. It's something to focus on a specific area.
And it goes to a slightly lower level of detail, I think, Jeff, right, in terms of the things that wouldn't be appropriate for the higher level plan to do, but you make it more granular.
Correct. It's going to take its direction from the official plan above it, but it is going to go into even a bit more detail about how you want to, I guess, direct development within that area.
Okay, so seeing as I had questions, does any other councillors have questions on what that means? Because we hadn't really heard that terminology before, sorry. And is everybody happy with keeping that in and having that as other than taking out the by date, putting that in as a performance measure? Okay, that's good.
Does it need to be related to, as you just said, Jeff, the county, like continuing to look at a county-wide official plan?
Well, I think it's something we should probably consider while we're looking into this process. The county's identified that they're going to update their official plan, or at least begin their review process in 2024. At that time, they're going to review the service delivery review direction about consolidating official plans at one tier. So we should keep that in the back of our minds if we're going to go through this process. But we could still implement a secondary plan in the meantime. It just does take some time.
Any other comments or concerns about this page? So you'll recall that your main priorities here focused on enhancing the customer service experience, committing to good governance and fiscal responsibility, continuing to modernize municipal processes and services, and continuing your continuous improvement exercises. And so some of the performance measures, the customer service ones are very familiar because it does things like tracking the customer complaints and inquiries and response times, and also staff training initiatives so that you're improving, so that you're not just tracking complaints, but you're actually tracking your measures to enhance. And so that's meant to be sort of a virtuous cycle there. On the good governance and fiscal responsibility, there's the regular reporting on the township's financial health and tracking variance or adherence from either MMAH financial indicators or variance rates budget to actual. In regard to the modernization, there's a number of specific activities here. Again, we've got a specific implementation date that, for being consistent, we'll want to remove. In regard to the digital records management strategy, but we've got outcomes associated with records digitized and services delivered digitally. And, you know, whether it's percent or whether it's number, whatever is more meaningful. The other thing is internal processes being reviewed. And then on the continuous improvement, it's about developing an enterprise-wide performance measurement network. And another piece of that is staff retention and turnover. But I think if you have an enterprise-wide performance measurement framework, that's actually the commitment to take these performance measurements and continuously improve them. So the ones that we have here as your opening off position, as a result of this number, would expect to improve over time. And then that's, you know, if you can't manage it, you can't measure. So by doing the performance measurement, that's a big enabler in your continuous improvement program. So that's how they kind of fit together. And then you see the specific actions. Councillor Smith?
Thank you. Again, I think this is great progress here. One example that I wanted to ask about, and it may not get called out specifically on this document, but to me, it fits under it. And it's certainly a source of a lot of the complaints and inquiries that are kind of coming in this time of year. And it relates to an area that we spend a lot of money on, and that's our roads. And so, now in the last 2 weeks, people want to know, well, when's the sand going to be swept off the road? When's my road going to be graded? How come you haven't applied dust suppressant yet? To the comment that Councillor Wood Roberts made earlier, yeah, it's going to take some effort to manage those things, measure those things. But if we set some goals there, in fact, if we were to document on our website that you can expect the sweeping to start or be completed 2 weeks after that we lift load restrictions on our roads or whatever, and blah blah blah. Obviously, Rob Camelon would be able to define these things pretty well. But if we get those defined as to what our objective is or what our target is, and can report after the fact that we met our goals or objectives, terrific. And if we didn't, there could be a discussion with council as to why or why not, and what more resources may be needed or whatever. But are those the kinds of goals or targets that would fit in under performance measurements and operational excellence?
They would, but the specific one you're mentioning also has a home back up in infrastructure. Stacey, if you can just pop up to number 2. Under ensure service standard policies align with emerging community needs, establish schedule for overall update of the service standards, review winter control services, consider and evaluate options to improve traffic. So there, I think like what you're really setting there is like a schedule for overall update of the service standards. And within that, whatever the new standards are going to be is going to have exactly the kind of measurements you're talking about, Council. So there's like a specific one in infrastructure that I think you collectively called out that you wanted to see addressed, but under the section 4, there's kind of a general commitment to it as well. So you got belts and suspenders on this one.
Okay. I think I was talking to the deputy mayor yesterday, and this is a topical thing right now. I know from the emails, calls I get, everybody wants to know these things, and we don't have a target defined. It's we relay to the road staff their complaint here about such and such, and they're doing their best efforts. But it would be good for council, be good for the community, for people to better understand that process. And if they could just go to our website and find, oh, there's what's happening, and here's when I can expect my road to be done. They're going to feel better about it. It hasn't been forgotten, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
No, that's a real good point, and that's precisely like those standards live in the policies. And if the policies haven't been considered in 10 or 15 years, like the policies are there to protect both staff and the public. Because if we're supposed to get around to it, but nobody knows when, and if nobody knows when, then you can't resource for it in the budget to ensure that it can be done by when. And if nobody knows that we're not resourcing to do it by when, then you get a huge expectation gap. And that's particularly true when you have so many new people moving in who might be more accustomed to an urban standard of service than a country standard of service. So that's where the policies are sort of everybody's friend, because it gives you clarity. So I think that's absolutely what's considered in that policy review that we discussed, but performance measurement is kind of a broader thing for the overall health of the organization. I think maybe the difference is the stuff in 2 is public facing. The stuff in 4 isn't necessarily public facing, but it's still awfully useful to Tamara and you, and frankly, her whole team.
John, I think Stacey. if I could just pick up on that topic, John, you just referenced country standard and city standard. I was watching morning news show this morning talking about the 64,000 potholes in Toronto that they repaired, and somebody said, well, they sure didn't come to my street on the morning talk. So, you know, we all try. The only problem with getting too specific in saying let's use sweeping because it's current, and you know, I wouldn't mind my street swept in town, but I don't think it was done today, is holding staff. You talked about it earlier, is we don't want to spend so much time recording or more time measuring than it takes to do the work. And we don't know what goes on in a day. We don't know if someone showed up sick that day and they were supposed to come and do Albion Crescent, but they weren't able to get it, or a beaver dam culvert took them away over here. I think we have to be careful, and Tamara's probably nodding a little bit on that one, to be too specific and say they're going to do Albion Crescent on next Wednesday afternoon, and then they don't come Wednesday afternoon because something we don't know what happened, and if they're doing their job, but then it's like they didn't come on Wednesday afternoons. Just be careful. It's a caution.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Madam Mayor. And I think there's a difference between promises and standards and MTO requirements. And, you know, because it's important from a municipal liability point of view that if it's an MTO requirement, that the municipality achieve it. If it's a policy, you know, we use best efforts to do this. It's in excess of what MTO requires, but we think it's good service. Then, you know, like there's got to be a difference between a commitment versus best efforts versus a legislative or statutory requirement. And I think that's where you got to rely on your staff to bring forward what's feasible and doable, and just make sure that we don't embed so many promises in the policies that it becomes, you know, a check that you can't cash. Councillor Clark, I see you got your hand.
Yeah, and I guess just following through on the same point, John, I guess within this section, perhaps maybe a point saying to establish standards based on realities of resourcing, because that's really what it's about. If we put all our resources towards just roads, there's nothing for anything else, but our roads would be fabulous. So there's a certain, I guess within the governance, there's a matter of establishing, you know, what are realistic expectations, I guess. And I don't know how we capture that, but at least it enables the, you know, the council or the establishment of policy and procedures to be relative to how we prioritize it and how relative to what we're comfortable in terms of resourcing.
I think that's certainly implied in the generality of what's there, because you know, it couldn't otherwise be thus, you know. But you know, Stacey made a real good point earlier. A lot of times strategic plans reflect have the same role. I'll come back to a cooking analogy. They're like, if there's not enough salt in the stew, then adding more salt is usually an important priority. Well, as soon as there is enough, then adding more is too much. And I think the whole thing about governance is it's always about knowing where you're starting. And I think this is the wisdom behind what Councillor Clark's mentioned a couple of times about what are the drivers of change. And oftentimes political responses are, well, we had too much of that, so we're going to do this instead. And I think a strategic plan's got to be careful to not assume that we know whether you need salt or pepper in 2 or 3 years. So we've tried to keep it directional in terms of we should have policies, but optional in terms of what they ought to be. Because you know what, like if there's a terrible recession and senior governments are slashing all of your transfers, then the service standard policies that align with emerging community needs are going to also have to align with your fiscal capacity. And if you've just been slaughtered on provincial transfers, then you know, the council of the day is going to have to manage that. Or if you're suddenly seeing a decline in municipal revenues from some other place. So that's the fun of, you know, that's the fun for the next council to deal with.
Well, and John, just to build on, I think, to your point, Councillor, when you look at kind of 2.3 here, ensure service standards align, you may not choose to update some, or you may not choose to do some things for exactly the reasons that you've identified. And I think Councillor Wood Roberts also said this, that it will need to be balanced with considerations around resourcing and being able to fund, service standard adjustments and things like that. So I think kind of the subtext, or what kind of is underneath all of this, is there are some tough decisions ahead. No strategic plan kind of leaves everything neat and tidy with a bow, although in the end you'll end up with a very pretty document. But at the end of the day, it's also putting a lot on the plate in terms of identifying what the priorities are, how you're going to balance competing priorities, how you'll resource and fund the things that are in this plan, or things that you need to happen. So it's a good exercise, but that is what's behind all of this, is managing expectations and understanding what you'll be able to do in a couple of years versus things that you may need to put down the road in terms of how you'll allocate resources, both staff and also finances. I think the deputy mayor had his hand up earlier. Not sure if you had anything else on this one.
I think it's pretty well been covered. Thanks, Stacey.
Any final thoughts on this one?
Councillor McKechnie?
Yeah, there's a couple things here. I haven't said anything, which I discussed with you and your team there, John. One was the code of conduct in regard to council and staff. I don't want to dwell on it, but to me, I've been fortunate enough to be on council for 3 terms, and this hasn't been a very positive term in regard to the way our staff have been treated. And I surely would like to see, if you're talking about a plan in the future, that council should be brought up to speed on how you should, if you have any unfortunate issues that you want to bring up, there's a time and a place and a way. And I think it's so important. I'm really disappointed with this term. We have great staff. They really try to do their best, and they haven't deserved a lot of, and I'll say because we're a team. We're supposed to be a team, a council. So there's that issue. In regard to environmental issues, which we talked a great deal about earlier, and about some people saying there's the people who poo-poo issues. I guarantee you that Walt McKechnie cares about the environment just as much as anybody around this table, our council table. Maybe I don't wear flowers and ribbons on my shirt and everything like that, promoting something, but I really, really care. And, I care so much, I wish we talked more about incinerating garbage or building a septic waste disposal plant. I will shut up now. Thank you very much.
I want to make sure we take a look at both of those. The implement council training and education, it stops after the word education. It could certainly add in, in relation to codes of conduct and staff council relations policies and other matters. If council wants, we could certainly put that in. That's certainly what's implied by that, because we do council training stuff, and that's always, in addition to the Municipal Act stuff, we get into that. So it could absolutely add that, because that's what.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just don't think it's strong enough.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. So I'm happy to add it in if
maybe the other council don't want to. That's just my opinion.
Well, I'm sure the mayor can help us.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe I'll look around. I actually, Councillor McKechnie, I read that in number 1, implement council training and education, that was assumed, that code of conduct, staff council training, roles and responsibilities, even what municipal governments are responsible for under the Municipal Act and what we are not. AMO often puts on things, so that I didn't think personally that needed to be a separate line, but I see Councillor Clark has his hand up. So I mean, if we want to strengthen it, what would he look around the table? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I think this is an important point, and perhaps maybe as some consideration, John, on how we got this termed. But council effectively working with staff is really what we're after. It's one thing in terms of putting on the website, what the role of council is and our responsibility and taking things forward. But I think for us to be an effective organization, how council works with staff, there's some best practices there, some best ideas there, best ways there that I think are very key to good governance and operational excellence. So perhaps I don't know what we can throw in there, what experience you've got from other townships, but it'd be nice to see something there a little stronger.
So you are in favor of having something like that we have just, could be after the word education, comma, including.
Yeah, effective, effective management or effective interplay. There's some other words there that show there's an important relationship between council and staff.
I think Councillor McKechnie was wanting specifically to use the word code of conduct. So I'm just going to look to maybe a show of hands. Do people want to put in after the word education some additional language? We don't have to wordsmith right now, but that actually references our code of conduct with a show of hands. Do they want that included?
I don't know if so much a code of conduct as it is, understanding, effective teamwork.
Well, we have I'm just going by what Councillor McKechnie requested, which was to add something.
Yeah.
So just with a raise of hands, if you want to include something, I felt it was implied, but I would also, oh my gosh, can you guys see me?
Yeah. No, I did that. Yeah, I did that. Just I stopped sharing my screen in case you wanted to be able to see everyone.
Well, actually, what ended up happening is I now see nobody, so I don't know where that went.
Let me put my screen back up.
No, I've just I can hear you, but I've come right out of the meeting. Because of that, Deputy Mayor Kennedy, I'm going to actually turn it over to you if you can continue on with what I was asking, which is under goal number 2, item number 1, implement council training and education. Who wants to see more words such as code of conduct added there? If you can view, and I'll try to find you.
Okay, can we take thoughts on that, including specific councillor code of conduct rather than just having it implied as a part of council training and education? Any thoughts on that? On that specific councillor code of conduct, those 4 words. Councillor Smith, I guess.
The only thing I was going to say, I was like the mayor and sort of assuming that it was covered by the generic statement. But if we are going to add something, it seems to me
if we are going to add anything. I just want to get your thoughts on councillor code of conduct right now.
Okay. Well, I was not in favor of adding it if you're doing a poll. But if we do add something, I think it needs to be councillor to councillor relations also. It's not just about council and staff.
Okay, let's not get too far down the weeds. Councillor code of conduct, yes or no?
And Deputy Mayor Kennedy, I'm back.
Okay.
Yep, I can
take it over.
I don't know what happened there. Okay, so I think it's implied there. And so for now, John Matheson, I think we will, and Stacy, just leave it as it is. Likely under the more detailed staff actions, and I'm sure that will all take place very early on and be part of a new councillors for those who are re-elected or elected package and training. So I think it's implied that it's there, and there's lots of opportunities under council training and education besides what our CAO and clerk does. As I referenced, AMO puts things on, Roma puts things on. There's all kinds of opportunities to be trained. So moving on.
And I think also to just come back to the other point Councillor McKechnie made about incineration.
Oh, pardon me.
Stacy, can you just remind me? I don't think that made it into the staff detailed stuff that's in their operating plan. They had a lot of stuff about diversion. So they were taking seriously the problem of exhaustion of your landfill capacity. And they had promote opportunities to reduce and divert waste. but it was kind of focused on blue box, diversion, food waste reduction. It didn't go as far as incineration. And, obviously a big barrier on incineration is provincial policy, but mindful that Councillor McKechnie raised that. Is that something that people think ought to be included here as something to study? Or
So thank you, John, I'd forgotten Councillor McKechnie's second point in my desire to see the screen again. That's a real detail that I believe we have actually given our environment manager direction to pursue all options. It wouldn't be us necessarily building one, but I do think that our staff have direction to be investigating all opportunities. Certainly there are with organic waste. So I don't know if that's too detailed or if we need to, going back to under infrastructure page, to adding something, because that would be under the.
I think it's under natural environment,
Okay.
opportunities to reduce and divert waste. It's
Yeah, there were, I can just speak to the staff side. There were a number of activities, blue box styles, organics, to John's point. There were also other things like usage time cards. In another part of the plan, you'll see transfer stations, as well as conducting and that was on the page that we were just on, in terms of modernization and municipal waste management service delivery studies. So there were a number of things relating to waste management, but I don't believe incineration was among them. But we can add if there's a desire to kind of put that in the strategic plan, or we can leave it in the staff version of the strategic plan, which identifies more of the implementation stuff that gives life to what you see on the screen.
So what are council's thoughts? Like I said, it's in the staff notes. It's just not necessarily here. Here it's more broad strokes. Again, we know what. Yes, Tamara?
I think if it's something, like, it's one thing to say staff have that direction or whatever, but I think this is where you want to capture some of that too, whether it's even just investigating further or continuing to investigate alternatives or things like that as new technology comes around. Or
perhaps that's the word, not just using the word incineration, is new technology, which could then include incineration. But I know Councillor McKechnie, this has been something that you brought up continually, and there is support for it. It's more that it's such a big elephant to bite off that Dysart isn't probably going to be the leader in this. We would be in collaboration with somebody. So maybe to John Matheson, is there a spot, or to Stacy, that you feel we could fit this in?
Well, it could definitely go under promote opportunities to reduce and divert waste. It could be under that could be amended to promote and explore opportunities to process, reduce, and divert waste. Like, it's unlikely, as many of you have said, that Dysart is going to be, it's usually an upper tier function to do something like this. But if you're promoting it and actively saying this is a responsible solution that we have to get on top of, like, it's likely to be a county thing or a multi-county thing, to your point.
Exactly.
I think Durham, for example, has got a big incineration project underway. It's not a thing where I would expect Dysart to do it, but you could absolutely be leaders in, forcing the conversation, which is how I interpret Councillor McKechnie's point. So it could be promote and explore opportunities to process, reduce, and divert waste. That would be clear enough about what you meant.
Yeah, Councillor McKechnie, what do you think about that? Using the word process and adding those words, definitely included in our strategic plan. Yeah, was that a yes? Hard to see with the lighting. Yes, okay. Thank you, John Matheson, for finding the words.
Okay, do you want to pop down to 5? So this is one that thematically is a little bit all over the place, but it's meant to be the sort of the basket clause for vibrant community, and it really is necessary to look at the actions because there's not a lot of there's not a lot of goals here. There's community engagement and communications, and so communications is outbound, engagement is back and forth two-way, and so the performance measurement that you're looking at there is actually measuring resident satisfaction and keeping track of visits, and not just quantitative but also qualitative. What ones are the people really using? And a true communications plan could well go a lot deeper than that in terms of but at a high level that'd give you sort of a dashboard. Advocate for community priorities with the county, provincial, and federal governments. This is your sort of general commitment to go off and advocate for the things that you can't deliver, but that you need the support of senior governments to deliver. And then support an age-friendly, safe, and active community. Age-friendly hits both seniors and youth. And so that's meant to be broadly inclusive. And of course, typically we either hear that there's not enough here for young people to do, or there's not enough that is technically suited to seniors. And so age-friendly is meant to be broadly inclusive. And so you can see some of the specific actions that are here. And happy to take your comments on anything you see that's giving you any concern.
I would say the silence is meaning that you captured all that quite well. So silence is a good thing sometimes.
It can go both ways. So,
well, I think we're all still very engaged. So absolutely, it's not like people falling asleep. It's not late at night. So I would say that is showing that you did capture all that quite well. So
those would be what your priorities would look like. I think the one thing that's clear is that every one of the goals, which tend to be a little bit bumper stickery, every one of them is backed up by actions and things to measure. So the good news is, I warned you about like the Hallmark greeting card strategic plan, best wishes for a special day, but no actual implementation plan for how to make it special. So, we will have a party. I will have a visit for my daughter. I will have a visit for my grandkids. I'll go for a walk in the park. Like, those are your implementation plans to have a special day. And I think what's really important is you've not done what many councils do, which is send each other a bunch of greeting cards for best wishes. You've actually got follow-up plans, which you'd be able to evaluate after the fact. It may not be all the way to time-bound SMART goals, which are almost like something you'd call, council's contract with Dysart. We will do this by such and such a time on such and such a date, or, money back guarantee on your property taxes. I mean, it's not going all that way, but it's certainly a lot more than best wishes for good public administration. And gives you a lot of a solid platform to work on. Certainly gives a huge job jar to Tamara's team, but lets the operating plan make it reasonable by saying when and what. And so you've also avoided another tragic error of strategic planning, which is say, yeah, let's do that in the first quarter of 2023 as well. And then that creates two tragic errors. One is it creates an undeliverable list of demands. And the other thing it does is, as soon as you're in the second quarter of 2023, everything's either late or undefined. So what you'll need is ongoing reporting annually to show how progress is being made. And that way that it'll evergreen the project. And at some point, as we said, you might start rank ordering what's really important versus what you're confident you've made sufficient progress on at that point. But at this stage, you sort of start off and say everything's equally important and let tomorrow's team figure out what's realistic. So anyway, that would then move us into the next section, unless there's any other comments about this before we move on. Stacy, could I impose upon you? I need to run away for about 3 minutes. I will be right back. But if you can just start, I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. So these are, this is the fun part where we kind of get to go over the work that we did last time and changes that we've made. So these are the updated values based on our last session. And I'd say actually as a group, we worked through these pretty coherently the last time. And so the main difference I'd say is under effective governance, we added the word integrity, and that's a bit of a call out to the discussion we had around the code of conduct and council staff relations, council relations. So the word itself is a direction to that without having to be very operational about adherence to X or do these things, because this is really the approach that Dysart will bring to everything it does, both council and staff. It's how you will approach delivering services to residents. It's how you will approach working with one another, working with staff, communicating out and communicating in, each one of these things. The other thing that is different from the last time is, and sorry, I just have to move my screen here, is we add a sixth a value around EDI, Bill, and the explanation there is build a welcoming and diverse community. One, because we had a pretty big discussion around inclusivity and being welcoming and open as part of your mission and vision. And so we wanted that to be reflected as well. You want to have good coherence among the strategic plan elements, but also because it is increasingly a best practice in the municipal sector to have a very explicit reference to EDI. And it shows that it's top of mind. You're obviously committed to it, and putting it in your values section is a very kind of public way of showcasing that commitment that you're already doing on a daily basis. So open to your thoughts here in terms of any further changes you might like to look. And the one thing I'll say is, as with everything, the words matter. It may look on a page like things are, one thing might matter more than the other, but really these are your values. This underpins everything you do. So they're all important. But happy to hear your input. Just any thoughts here?
I'll jump in first, if that's okay. I think you've done an excellent job of capturing what we talked about last time. I really like what you said, and I'm glad you didn't number them. They are all equally important, and some more so than others at different times. So I think I wouldn't change a thing on this page. So, but I just look to see if there's anybody if there's anything that we missed or didn't capture. I think you guys have done a great job there. Lots of nods there, Stacy. So
great.
Yeah.
All right.
Stacy.
What's that?
I got the easy part.
Good job.
Councillor Clark.
Stacy, for consideration, I think the only one, the last point, the equity, diversity and inclusion would be maybe for consideration, building a welcoming, diverse and progressive. That I'm just trying to think of something that's going to kind of resonate with the community a bit.
Sure. Does the rest of council welcome that addition? I think it reflects a lot of what we spoke about at our last meeting. I'm seeing some nodding heads, but okay. I'll just. All right, so let's move on to, this is the updated mission. And we put at the top kind of the summary of those building blocks. And I'm sure you'll remember we discussed kind of what are the core elements that we want to have in our mission. And then we did a bit of wordsmithing, but we've provided here a number of options, and you'll see they look quite similar because there were really some elements of the building blocks that there was strong alignment. So for example, including residents, visitors, and businesses, I think we all agreed that that's kind of the right subject for this, for the mission. But yeah, we wanted to present back some options based on what we discussed last time. I'm not sure if there's one that stands out, or if you think we're pretty close. We don't necessarily have to wordsmith it to death today, but if you think that we're on the right track, or there's one that you particularly like, or have some suggestions to improve, we'd love to hear it. Councillor Smith.
I'll just kick it off because I know these are sort of an iterative thing, and I, I again like the progress here. There were a couple of little things that I had jotted down when I was looking at the phrases here. First, I like number one, but I wondered about maybe putting businesses ahead of visitors. Our residents and businesses are the people who are here all the time, and so I'd like to engage, cater if you like to them, first and foremost, and from the third one, I like that into the future, or now and into the future. So I wondered if we foster a great quality of life, if we went with number one, to foster a great quality of life now and into the future. To finish it off, just one perspective. Thank you.
Other thoughts? Mayor Roberts.
Yeah, for the reason that Councillor Smith just said about the last bit in we'll call it number 3, or the third one down, that references now and into the future. So for that reason, I actually liked the third one down. But I would also, I don't have a problem sort of integrating 1 and 3.
They're very close. They're all very similar. Other thoughts?
I like number 3 as well, because we're talking about engaging our residents as one of our priorities in that sentence. And then I love the part about adding the now and in the future, or the quality of life, putting that into the third one. I think Councillor Smith hit on a great note there, just however we put it all together. But my vote's for 3 with slight modification. I think there's not much difference between all 3 of them.
There's not. You guys did a lot of work in the last session, actually, to come to an agreement. Yeah, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, and I saw Councillor Clark too, but what I just forgot, that's why I like section, the third one down, is that engage piece, as opposed to just delivering services. It makes it like, to deliver services, it's like, here, we're the municipality, we're just going to dole out. Like I like the word engage. It makes it a two-way street. So I like that word included in there, engage.
Yeah, Madam Mayor's reading my mind. I'm the same thing. The engage shows us as we're here, for the community. We're here to support the community, and I think that word is very important.
It's fair to note that engage is in all 3, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think, if there's no other comments, I think we're on the right track, and we're pretty close. And so I think we like serve and engage, potentially like bringing businesses ahead of visitors, but also we want to incorporate that future piece as well. So it's not just today, it's into the future. Okay. Any other comments? All right, let's look to the vision. Just mindful of the time as well. So again, we have your building blocks here, where we kind of landed in terms of the discussion last time, and you will see, unsurprisingly, these look very similar because, again, we did a lot of work last time to start to come to some degree of consensus. So we're representing these back there are slight nuances, mainly around the environment, although I guess given some of the discussion we've had, you could say actually these are fairly significant nuances. So the first is protects the natural environment, the second is leverages the natural environment, and the third is prioritizes. And the verbs matter here, and I think we've said a couple times that words matter, so we'd be interested on your input here. Someone's got to kick it off.
I don't want to always go first. And you know what? Just to put some councillors on the spot that haven't spoken up, I'm gonna call on Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Wood Roberts after, just to see where they're at, because I know you ladies have put just as much effort and thought into this. So just what Councillor Donaldson, what are you thinking about the words that Stacey just referenced there?
I think that I am leaning more towards a leverage, the second one, maybe the second or the third one. Leverages the natural environment to attract, and I guess the other one is encouraging the local economy. I don't know, maybe the third one, culturally rich, welcoming. I don't know, they're so close together and it is just like one or two words difference. So I'm not any help at all.
No, you were, and that's exactly, they're very hard to read that, and we need to get out our thesaurus, can you say that, to know. So just hold that thought. You did make, and then so to Councillor Wood Roberts, what do you?
Kind of lean toward number 3. I don't think that Dysart needs to leverage the natural environment. People either like it and love it or they don't. I like the third one.
That's great. And then I think Councillor Smith did have his hand up, so.
Well, I was just going to try and provoke discussion. There was one point that sort of applied to all 3 of them in my mind. We used the term the natural environment. I wonder if we could create a greater sense of ownership and commitment on the part of our community if we said our natural environment. It personalizes it a little bit, and so that was one thing I wanted to mention. And I also thought that prioritizes our natural environment was actually preferred to leverages, and maybe simplify it a little bit by just saying prioritizes our natural environment in order to be attractive to residents and visitors while supporting the local economy. Is the ecologically sustainable growth really necessary if we're prioritizing our natural environment? Where I was coming from, and trying to, I think it was Councillor Wood Roberts last time was encouraging us to keep this short and kind of simple. And if we're prioritizing our natural environment, maybe we don't need to say ecologically sustainable growth.
Okay, there's a whole bunch of thoughts there. So for the councillors that haven't spoken up yet, are we sort of leaning to crafting the third one, for instance, using the word prioritize? Did people, I like prioritize, that was my first choice. So I think prioritize, would we like to change the word the or to our?
Yeah, let's see.
I see some nods for that. And then to Councillor Smith's further point, which I'm not sure if I was able to capture or write down. Councillor Smith, you said, well, you didn't, can you continue after the word natural environment?
I think he means, do you need ecologically sustainable growth if you said you're going to prioritize the environment? Like maybe you just ended at local economy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Smith.
Well, I think you want sustainable growth. So if you change the words the natural environment and our local, as opposed to the natural environment and the local economy to our, so everybody has some ownership in it.
So how do
So-
we feel about
Yeah, so do people want to keep in the whole sentence, which is still short, but I think it isn't just about, economies. When I think of economy, I don't necessarily think of I know growth might be part of the economy, but what am I trying to say here?
Do you add in our economy, like Nancy suggested, our environment and our
Yes,
economy?
but she was also saying that she wants to keep an ecologically sustainable growth. So, and I want to keep it in two, and I'm trying to articulate why and try to see the difference between just economy, which seems like business, whereas growth we reference in other things could be a family buying a new home. I suppose indirectly that's economy, but you know what I'm trying to say? Maybe you don't. I'm not sure if I do.
What about prioritizes our natural environment while encouraging our local economy and sustainable growth, or with sustainable growth?
Yeah, I vote for that, changing the out. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Councillor McKechnie, what you thinking? Just to get everybody in the conversation.
Whatever you want, it's good for me.
You like, okay. Deputy Mayor Kennedy?
I like the with sustainable growth. But we're going to do the two are combined. We're going to encourage our economy, but it's going to be with sustainability as well.
Okay. Stacy, do you want to, are you able to put that? I feel like when I put Mallory on the spot when we're creating resolutions on the fly, for some reason I'm struggling with the double word hour and hour, but I don't know. Could you read it from the top and see if that's something that we all agree on?
Yeah. Dysart is a culturally rich, welcoming, and diverse community that prioritizes our natural environment while encouraging our local economy with sustainable growth.
Could you get rid of the word our between encouraging and local?
I think you need some kind of
Encouraging local
preposition.
economy with sustainable growth.
I think you need a little preposition there or something.
You could say a robust local economy, a strong local economy with sustainable growth, something like that.
Robust is a lovely word for a strategic plan.
Strong.
Yes.
Almost as good as collaboration.
Okay, so we're tweaking. Do people like robust? How about John Matheson, who's worked on this a lot? Who's good? I'm going to pass it over to you.
Firstly, I like the changes that you've made, and the choices that you've made. I actually like. I think prioritize is way better than leverage, but leverage came up last time, so I think that's a good choice. I like making it our natural environment. I'm not worried about the repetition of our, because it creates a parallelism, and I think it's really important to maintain the balance between we prioritize our environment, but while we encourage our local economy and with sustainable growth. But so it means that the growth that you do is sustainable growth. So prioritizing doesn't mean you don't do nothing never anywhere. It means you prioritize our environment while we encourage our local economy with sustainable growth. Got to be sustainable, can't be unsustainable, but we're not just like taking a glass donut dome, putting it over Dysart and saying, see, in 50 years, we're not doing it. So I think you've got a real nice balance here. I would not lie down in front of a truck called robust to stop you from putting it in. I don't like it, but I think it's just making it longer. And I don't mind if you say our local economy, but that is not the biggest value add comment I will ever make this year, I hope. So like, I think you're getting pretty close.
So with John's comments, who's worked on these sorts of things a long time, although the word robust is kind of fun, now that we see that in print, and if everyone can move their screen across to see that red box, is there support what we see in front of us.
Could the word sustain or with sustainable growth be changed to through sustainable growth, or is with more appropriate?
I think they both work.
Could you make with an and, encouraging our local economy and sustainable growth? So you're not balancing one on the other, you're encouraging both.
That's what it was originally, I think.
It was and. We just took out the word ecologically because we've already said we're prioritizing the natural environment. So creating a local economy. So do we want to change the with at the end to and?
I would like it, because it seems like the only way you're going to have a local economy is with sustainable growth. Depends how you read it.
Councillor Smith?
Just as a reaction, I thought that Tamara's suggestion of through sustainable growth was a good one. I was struggling, frankly, with the phrase with sustainable growth. If you were to look at through and with, kind of with would be my third priority, if you like. I think through though is a great word.
But you can read it in that you're encouraging our local economy through growth. You need to encourage it regardless of sustainable growth.
Well, it's interesting. We're encouraging our local economy through sustainable growth. We're not encouraging our local economy through, any old thing.
Yeah.
So that's how you're, that's true to your prioritizing the natural environment, but your key to unlock the handcuff there is to say we will promote the local economy with sustainable growth. Through sustainable growth.
Well, if I might continue with it, I said I like through, and the reason for that is just following on to what John said. If you think in the short term, you can always drive business growth by making decisions that, frankly, aren't going to last in the long run. And so sometimes we're going to have to say, no, we're not going to do that. I know it would be great for business in 2023, but we don't believe it sets us up for long-term success. And that's why, as I said, I kind of opted for through when Tamara put that out. To me, it makes a lot of sense, and it's consistent with prioritizing our natural environment.
So Stacey, I'll just pick up. So why don't we just type out, just have the word through, and we can all read that. Just take a minute and read that quietly to ourselves, and just see it without the choice of words. And then maybe we'll see if there's support. And Nancy, I do see your hand back up. Did you want to comment on that before we?
I actually wanted to back up a little bit further in the sentence. I just had another thought.
Okay, we have to be cognizant of the time too. We are at 2 o'clock.
So Dysart is a culturally rich, welcoming, and diverse community that prioritizes our natural environment. Then I've got while promoting our local economy through sustainable growth. I mean, is promoting a better word than encouraging? I don't know. It's just a different verbiage. Promoting is to me, you're more participating in it than encouraging. It's like say, yeah, way you go, have fun. But promoting is being involved in it or a partner.
Yeah, promoting's a stronger word. I like that.
Maybe just to John Matheson again for his expertise.
It's a good word too. You could make that change.
Deputy Mayor Kennedy.
Yeah, I like the promote as well, because it reflects back to our Section 3 Economic Development and Prosperity Bullet number 2, which is promote and promote is a theme throughout that whole section. So it's just reinforcing that we are staying with our pillars. So I like the word promote.
Well, we just had 3 votes for promote through Councillor Wood Roberts' comment, so I feel like we're really close. I'd say stop tweaking and should we do, what do you think, everybody? I'm gonna just pull screen so I can see everybody. Don't worry, Stacy, you can leave it up. I can see everybody. Is there consensus for this amazing collaborative tweaking of language? And words matter, and they do. And so is there support for it? Just a little like a show of hand if you like what we see. We sure do. That's pretty darn tootin' good.
Well, you guys wrote it, so like this is probably one of the most interactive and collaborative kind of sessions I've had on doing this. And what's great is that you'll feel ownership over it because we worked on it together, and each of you got to have a say and figure out what the right verb is. And that's really important. That's why we wanted to do this and why we've come back to you 3 times now to do this work. So I think we have a strategic plan framework now. And kind of the next step for us is to do everything around it. And so this goes to Councillor Clark's point earlier, which is drafting the fuller document that will summarize, the SWOT analysis, as well as current trends and challenges and concerns, and where the organization is at today and what it needs to think about in the years ahead, as well as a summary of the process so that people can understand how we got here, the strategic plan framework, and then also a bit of how the plan will be used and what the plan is for staff to report back on it, whether it's an annual thing or semi-annual, and we'll work with Tamara on that. And the end result is really a wonderful product that will be beautifully designed with pictures from Dysart. And again, just like words matter, images matter as well. And so we'll work really closely with staff in finding the right images, but then it's something that you'll be able to put online. So it is, of course, it's an inward facing plan, but it's also an outward facing plan that you can use to communicate with your residents moving forward as well. And then we'll come back to you with it. So you can see it and review it and endorse it and adopt it, and then you'll have your strategic plan, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. John, you want to say a few words before we wrap up?
Only thank you. I think I told you that this would be kind of fun, and it certainly was from our end. So thanks very much for all your engagement on it.
Well, thank you to both you and Stacy for, we've worked with you on the service delivery review and other things. And so I think you guys, really were a great organization for us to work with to help us develop it. Like you said, ultimately at the beginning, it is going to be our plan. It's the corporation's plan going forward. And I just really want to thank all the staff. There's only a few that I can see on screen, but there's lots listening behind the scenes, and that added so much to this, from everybody that answered the survey, every single staff member, part-time, full-time, summer staff. Everybody matters at Dysart. Your opinion matters, and your experience matters, because as counselors we do our job, but you guys are boots on the ground and are doing the work. We just tell you what to do nicely, hopefully. So it's really much appreciated, and I'm really excited that we did take the decision. And I asked all of council, is this the right time? We're still in COVID, and I don't know, and maybe we shouldn't be doing a strategic plan in our last term, and we're still meeting on Zoom. And this was really effective, and you could just tell from that last little conversation, this last half an hour of developing the mission and values, how engaged we all are and how productive it was, even though I'm sitting in my den in my house. Usually these things are done with post-it notes on a wall and all those other kind of dynamic things where you're getting up and walking around in a room. So lastly, to thank all of council, all of you, for participating in this and really taking ownership for it. So Yeah, be great. I look forward to when it actually, the final version comes to a council meeting and we adopt it and move forward. Be our legacy, if you will. So anything else, Tamara or Mallory, if I'm missing anything else?
Can't think of anything at the moment, other than to echo your thanks to everybody for their participation. It was a very quick turnaround for Strategy Core and for us from 2 weeks ago to be able to give them all or dump all our information on them and for them to try and sort it out into some sort of meaningful document for your discussion.
Well, hopefully it was a great process. I certainly, speak for myself. I can tell from the engagement of council today, but hopefully Stacey and John, when you are off screen and talking to yourselves, you see, oh, that crew at Dysart, they were really good to work with. So that's great. Yeah. Okay. So really, thank you. I just now will need those 2 resolutions. One is to confirm proceedings for today. So move for seconder for that. Councillor Wood Roberts and Councillor Donaldson. Be it resolved that the bylaw number bylaw 2022-51 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting held on May 17th, 2022 be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and the corporate seal attached hereto. All in favor? Okay, that's passed, carried. And lastly, just a motion to adjourn today. Councillor Smith and Deputy Mayor Kennedy. Be it resolved, the council adjourn its special meeting held on May 17th, 2022 at 2:11 p.m. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. And just to remind council that our next meeting is Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in person in the council chambers. See you then. Okay, bye now.